Hey everyone, in today's video I want to take a little walk through my fragrance collection, talk about my most loved, most worn fragrances, both past and present, as well as some scents that I have kind of outgrown or just gotten a different nose for, you know what I mean? Because this is probably going to be on the longer side, I have a lot of scents to talk about. I figured I would put timestamps down below right next to each of the fragrances that I'm going to talk about. Otherwise, if you are in it to win it, want to watch this whole video, feel free to watch on through. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, first let's talk about what is probably the oldest fragrance in my collection. It is Harvey Prince's Yogini. I think I bought this probably with Birchbox points because that is how I discovered it in one of my first and probably one of the first Birchboxes ever. That's how old it is. And clearly it's not in service anymore because I couldn't even spray this guy if I wanted to. But basically it is a super spicy with sandalwood and amber right at the top, and then it really mellows out into something sweet and more floral. And what I love about this is it really walks that line between being spicy and powerful, but also still feeling very fresh, which is not going to be the case for a lot of similar fragrances that I have. You will quickly find that I have a very predictable palette is probably the right word, even though I feel like I have a diverse array of fragrances, and I've started diversifying more recently. You will find lots of ambers and lots of sandalwoods. So that tends to be the scent profile I like, but this manages to give you some of those things, those spicier notes, but still feeling super fresh and light. I keep it around, first of all, just because and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but there's such a strong tie between scent and memory. So whenever I smell something, it like puts you back in that, like in a place, a specific place and time, maybe even an event, unlike any other sort of memory trigger can. I don't know. It can be comforting sometimes. And this for me was like when I first kind of started diving into beauty, like here on YouTube, making videos, playing with Birchboxes and things like that. I also keep it around because I know one day I will want to repurchase this again because it is such a loved fragrance. I don't need to now because, as you'll soon see, I got a lot going on in my stash, all of which have very similar notes to them, but I will want this around as a reference, even though I'm sure the scents will warp with time. I just like to keep it on hand for both of those reasons. So next fragrance. Okay, next up is Nest's Midnight Fleur. This is probably my second oldest fragrance, and it is actually one that I don't really love so much anymore. You can see I really made my way through this. It's not all gone by a long shot, but I used to think this was so savory, and it could be that the scent has changed with age. You can see just the liquid itself has yellowed a little bit, so I'm sure that's changed the scent. But all of the main notes are still there, and what I used to think was this ultra rich and deep and musky sort of scent is now incredibly sweet. The first thing I smell is like this sweet amber right up top, and then it dissipates into like a really short-lived spicy note, maybe a patchouli at the end, but it is not long lasting, and there's no floral. Like I don't smell floral in here anymore, despite the fact that it is called Midnight Fleur, and I think it's supposed to have like a jasmine or something like that in here. I don't smell that at all, not even in the top note sweetness. So this is one that I may need to go smell a fresh new bottle of to fully appreciate maybe what I initially loved about it, because right now it is just not one that I enjoy all that much anymore. Moving on to a Katy Perry fragrance. This I think I got either as like a press sample in a sampler box. Either way, you can see it's gotten a whole lot of love, not in recent years, but when I wore it faithfully. And this is in the Killer Queen collection. It's called Royal Revolution, and no surprise, it has notes of amber, notes of patchouli, a little bit of vanilla in there. But I will say, of all the fragrances I have, this is probably the weakest. Again, maybe weakened by time, but I have come to love fragrances that I find last longer on me, and therefore when I spray them, they are quite a bit stronger. So maybe that's why this smells comparatively weaker. But if you like those scent profiles but you don't like a really strong fragrance, this might be another one worth looking into. I will say though, it has a very perfumey sort of smell, like that characteristically. It's not spicy, it's almost sharp. It just smells like a a fragrance, a perfume. Unlike some of these others that smell more true to the scent they claim to have in them, this one just has that perfumey sort of tinge to it that dissipates once you've sprayed it and it's evaporated from your skin a little bit. And the other thing about this is I don't know that this is even produced anymore. I think it's only available, this particular the Blue Royal Revolution scent is only available on like fragrance websites that still have stock of them, because when I looked it up, you couldn't find it on a Katy Perry fragrance website or anything like that. So it might be a little bit harder to come by, but relatively affordable. Next up is another fragrance that's been discontinued, unfortunately, but you can still find it on fragrance websites, and it's easily one of the most floral scents that I have in my collection. This is Stella by Stella McCartney, and it is rosy. It says it has a little bit of peony in it. It even has a little bit of sharpness that I think comes from the citrus that they say is in it, and it's easily the most citrusy scent I have too. That's kind of on my list of where I want to expand my collection when the day comes, is into the citrus realm, because smelling this, it just keeps things so light and fresh, and also keeps the floral from becoming too powdery, which is something I can tend to run into with floral fragrance. And of course, it has like a base of amber. So once that like the sweeter, more floral top notes are gone, you have that beautiful deep base of amber, which I love. Speaking of florals, the only other fragrance I have that is very truly floral is from Jo Malone. This is the Peony and Blush Suede. I have two fragrances that actually are sold together. When I first was exploring Jo Malone fragrances, I asked them, what they would recommend. They told me that Jo Malone is designed to be layered with each other, and they recommended this combination: Peony and Blush Suede, like I said, and Wood Sage and Sea Salt. So I've worn these individually. I wear these together. Peony and Blush Suede is floral. It's a slightly fruity. It's not quite citrusy. I think the note in here they say is apple, and then it is ever so slightly not musky, but like the suede that they say is in here, that definitely gives it like a somewhat deeper, less sweet note at the bottom, but it's really nowhere near as rich as a lot of the fragrances that I have, which is probably why, compared to the Wood Sage and Sea Salt, I've used less of it. I always, whenever I wear Peony and Blush Suede, always wear it in tandem with Wood Sage and Sea Salt. Otherwise, it does feel a little too sweet and powdery on me, but paired with Wood Sage and Sea Salt, which is still fresh but more savory, and I'll tell you what, I didn't realize you could capture the smell of the beach in a bottle, but this is pretty darn close. These paired together is just the perfect combination of sweet and earthy and savory. And like I mentioned, they actually sell a combination of these two together on the Sephora website. When I was looking this up, turns out it must be a very popular combination for them, because they sell even smaller bottles of these together if you kind of want to smell the two for yourself. Now let's move into some heavy hitters. These are stronger fragrances in my opinion, but as a result, they are what I reach for when I want something that is going to last all day. And of course, if they're the scent I'm going after. First up is the Tom Ford Ombré Leather. As the name suggests, the first thing that hits your nose is leather here. There are notes of cardamom and patchouli that start to develop. Overall, I would just say the leather, while it is very long lasting, once it starts to dissipate and the fragrance starts to develop on your skin, I find it gets much sweeter on me. Not overwhelmingly sweet, but just you don't just smell like a new car all day, if you know what I mean. It does develop into something a little bit more complex, where it's like smoke and leather and sweet, earthy, woodsy, sort of, you know what I mean. Then the other relatively heavy scent that I have from Tom Ford is Tobacco Vanille. It is naturally very tobacco forward when it hits you, but then quickly develops into something quite a bit sweeter than I would say Ombré Leather does, but it still retains the spiciness of the tobacco with it. And the spiciness doesn't just come from the tobacco. The notes, like when you go look at the profile, it'll say ginger and cocoa as well. I get less of the cocoa. The sweetness to me does not come from any sort of cocoa scent, but the spiciness is definitely like a sharpness from a ginger and then the tobacco. It's a beautiful fragrance, and I love to layer both of those with my last Tom Ford fragrance, which is Lost Cherry. This is a pretty simple combination of cherry and almond. I mean, I'm sure it's more complex than that, but the notes that my nose picks up, cherry and almond, and I get guess there is something a little bit savory at the base there. Like it's not fruity, citrusy, sweet. Like there's definitely something a little bit more savory there. Maybe it's the almond kind of keeping it from being too light and bright. But because it is considerably sweeter than either of those two fragrances, this is what I will use if I'm in the mood for something like very heavy, but just maybe not quite that heavy. I want to lighten it up a little bit. This is what I'll reach for as just like a little topper. I will do a spritz of the Tom Ford, which by the way, if you are very sensitive to fragrance, I would spritz it in the air and walk through it, because sometimes when I spray them on my skin or my clothes, you will smell it for weeks to come. I mean, if you will smell it for a very long time. So if you want a light misting, you don't want to overwhelm yourself or others, spritz it and walk through it. Keep in mind, I am not a fragrance expert, so if that is absolute blasphemy, I apologize, but I'm just saving you if you don't want to overwhelm yourself with any of these, because it's kind of easy to do. But because the Tom Ford scents are so long lasting on me, I have wanted to venture into the floral and see if he has a citrus as well, just because those lighter and fruity fragrances can tend to disappear, at least on me anyway, a little bit faster, but whatever is in his formula, it just sticks to you like glue, and I absolutely love it. Now let's move into another kind of family of fragrances that I've relatively recently started accruing. It is from the brand Juliette Has a Gun. My mom, 2 Christmases ago, got me a little sampler where they give you this Not A Perfume, which is the base, and then this is a brand that is also meant for layering, where this is the base, and then they have a lot of other, I think they're supposed to be like kind of top, like you layer it over this, although you could wear them alone as well, I'm sure. But after looking into it more, what I think is so interesting is that this Not A Perfume is intentionally a one-note perfume. It uses I had to write this down to remember, Cetalox, which is actually synthetic ambergris, as a base note or one note, but it happens to be the base note that is used in lots of many other fragrances. And so naturally, it is the base that goes to all of the other fragrances that Juliette Has a Gun has. So it's kind of hard for me to describe what this, part of the reason why I had to look this up is because every time I smell this, and part of what drew me to it is I couldn't put my finger on what it smells like, having never personally, I don't think, smelled ambergris before. It's not like you just walk outside and you're like, oh, that's a peony, that's fresh cut grass, whatever it is. Like, this is unlike anything I've ever smelled, and it's so pure and fresh. Like, it has a slight earthiness, like a minerality to it without being savory in the least. So I really love this. One thing though I didn't notice this at first. I had the sampler, and when I read the reviews of this online, everyone said that the larger bottle didn't last as long as the sampler. And part of what I've loved about the sampler is it lasted a really long time. And at first, like I said, I didn't notice it, but after wearing this more and more, I do find that this is relatively short-lived compared to the sampler size. Layering it with the other scents I have certainly helps, but worn alone, I do notice that I can layer this up, reapply it throughout the day, and I don't get overwhelmed in the least by it. But as a result, if you don't have it, maybe take a travel size to go, because it's a great way to freshen up, refresh your scent throughout the day, but it also might not last you throughout the day if you don't have that. Then one of the 2 fragrances that I have to layer over top of Not A Perfume is Mad Madam. This is another really hard one for me to describe because I just can't smell anything like that's easily identifiable. It's not floral. I think there are supposed to be floral notes in here, but it doesn't smell overtly floral or citrusy or rich and ambery. Like, none of this helps because I don't know how to tell you what it smells like. So let me just read the exact description. It says rose oxide, black currant bud absolute, and ambroxan. Couldn't tell you where in nature you find an ambroxan, but that's what this puppy smells like, and it's so unique and it's so beautiful worn alone, but also worn over Not A Perfume. And then the other scent, and one of my most recent additions, is Lady Vengeance. Now this, especially, I didn't smell it, like when I was in the shop smelling this, I didn't really get any floral scents, but comparatively speaking, next to Mad Madam, Lady Vengeance is very floral. It has a very rosy top note, but then as it develops, it definitely has a little bit more like patchouli and vanilla, so you get the sweet and savory and floral all in one. It's definitely still complex, but not quite as much of a mystery as Mad Madam is, to me anyway. And last up, one of my most recent additions to my collection, along with Lady Vengeance, is called In the Mood For, that's the brand name, and then the scent is Figue Noire. This is kind of a harder one to find. I picked this up in a store, and when I went to go look for it online, not a whole lot of online retailers carry it, and when I did find it, it was in its English name called Black Fig. So as a heads up, if this sounds like it might be something for you, look for In the Mood For, Figue Noire, as well as Black Fig. So this, as the name suggests, very strong fig note right up front. But what I love so much about it, because I'm not typically a food person, you wouldn't know that because I also have a cherry fragrance, but for the most part, not really a big food fragrance person. But when this fig, first of all, the fig is very like light and fruity almost. And then when this develops, it becomes like sort of a woodsy kind of scent, like very earthy. There's patchouli. Somebody actually said that earthiness probably is patchouli. When I checked the notes, there is patchouli in here, but there is also cedarwood. And I think that's a big contributor for why this smells like a fresh walk in the woods. It's absolutely unique and beautiful. It also says it has those notes of like leather and musk in there. So while it is a food fragrance, it develops into this much more complex and savory sort of scent if you, like me, are not really a food person either. So I would love to hear from you. What are your favorite fragrances? And are there any that you have found you've just kind of grown apart from, that you don't remember them smelling quite like they did when you initially loved them? Let me know down in the comments below. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye guys.